In terms of kind of a overall look at downtown Colorado Springs, where do you think we are? Are we in a good place?
No, I think we have a lot of, I think there's a lot of challenges with the downtown. I think that, obviously, well, I'll give you a good example. I ride my bike on the weekends. I go to Manitou. I can't get in Manitou. I go to the University Village Shopping Center. Can't get a parking spot. I go downtown and I can shoot a cannon off and not hit anybody. So, I mean, if people think that we're in a good place, they're delusional, and I've had people approach me. One guy approached me who was associated with the guy that developed the Santa Monica downtown mall, to say, hey, let's put a deal together and have somebody buy the entire, Tejon street and have a private developer redevelop that into a cool mall. I mean, that's an idea that will never happen in this town, but it's an interesting idea, and other cities have done that. I think that, fundamentally one of the problems from a real estate perspective that's wrong with downtown is that the infrastructure isn't really the right size. How can I put this, make it make sense? The individual storefronts, the way those buildings were built, when they were built, let's say 100 years ago, 120 years ago, whenever that was, they built them narrow and deep, which is not conducive to modern retailing. And what you like to get are small boutique shops in a downtown. And so since the physical plants of the buildings we have are not conducive to modern retailing, you really can't get the rents, because that would mean you'd have to have a bigger store in there. Bigger store comes with a denser population of people who can buy stuff. And so those dynamics don't fit together in the downtown right now the way it's configured. I've actually said you could take a chainsaw and chop off the back half of all the buildings downtown and just knock down the back half and have, put a parking behind there, whatever. But the physical plants that we have in Colorado Springs typically don't work for a modern boutique kind of atmosphere that you'd like to have in a touristy downtown. If you had like an 800 or 1,000 square foot retail space and you could rent it out for $20 a square foot, you can make that math work on a per square foot basis, but you have to have a bunch of them. And conversely, we might have a building that's got 6,000 square feet and we're getting $6 a square foot. Or an owner might have a tenant sign up and it might be a high rate of rent, but it's an untenable situation because a tenant can't make enough money to pay the rent and pay himself at the end of the day. So we have a real challenge with the physical plant that's available. I've heard rumors, a lot of rumors about the downtown, where Sam Guadagnoli and some of those guys that own multiple buildings downtown are interested in maybe knocking down some of the bars and reconfiguring that into really cool retail. Don't know if that'll happen. So there's a lot of things we need to do. We tried to get a bus going through the downtown back and forth, which I thought was a great idea. Turned out it was a great place for the homeless guys to get out of the cold in the wintertime, and nobody else would ride the bus. So, we're not even close to where we need to be with respect to the downtown. And I'm a big downtown supporter, but we have miles and miles and miles to go before we get where we want to be.
What's the first step?
Well, I think you have to have a good comprehensive plan. And I think that the problem with Colorado Springs has been, is, and probably is likely to be, as far as I can tell, that we're afraid to make investments in, things like, and I'm not going to use the C word for a second, but a convention center. Or in my idea where we go ahead and invest in the national governing bodies and build facilities for them. One idea that I put around is to have an Olympic Village downtown in that redevelopment area, which would be awesome. The trick is to have a vital downtown is you need to have two things that are critical, and we don't have those. You need to have population density, and you need to have money density. And money density will follow population density generally. And so the trick is, how do you get more people to the downtown? I'm aware of projects that are about to come online on Nevada Avenue. And they're going to be cool projects. They're little apartment projects. And again, the idea of those apartments downtown will bring population density downtown, and you hope then therefore money density downtown. Then you have to have stuff downtown that's attractive to people that want to live downtown. And I don't know how many Starbucks restaurants you can have, but you need to have a variety of things for people to hang out. And of course, the bigger question is, what's the point of all that? Why is a downtown important? And what I love to say is that, a city without a downtown is a city without a soul. The downtown is the soul of a city, and so that's why it's really important. That's why the people who think about these things really put a lot of emphasis in it, because frankly, I heard a guy say, well, you ought to do is just move the downtown to pick a place, call University Village Colorado Springs downtown. I mean, you're labeling geographic areas of downtown. This guy's idea was, okay, well, forget that. You couldn't make that one work. Go someplace else. It's an interesting intellectual conversation to have. You know, I mean, University Village is pretty cool. You know, I mean, it's like being in Scottsdale or some other major city, and it's all new shops and it's fresh, and you know, you don't get accosted by a homeless guy. You know, so there is that. But I think it starts with you know, the idea of getting population and financial density into the downtown and what you have to do in order to accomplish that.
So, in your opinion or your experience, you tell me, the people have to come before the business, or the business have to come before the people?
Oh, I think businesses follow rooftops. You know, so you get people first, and you know, we have. The great thing about Colorado Springs is we have amenities that are not necessarily downtown centric. So, you know, for example, let's say that somebody builds a really cool apartment building. First of all, the people that move into the apartment building are going to kind of dig on that social scene of that apartment building. I mean, that's just what happens. I mean, you can have an apartment building out on East something Road, and it can be all, you know, Sergeant Snuffy from Fort Carson. Okay, that's a population of people that love living next door to each other because they have cultural experiences, right? They can relate to each other. You build a really cool apartment downtown, you're going to get people who, you know, think they're cool, want to have that experience. And those people are probably drawn culturally similarly to things like bike trails and open space and access to the I-25 corridor and some of those things that are endemic to the downtown. And so, you know, you build the rooftop, you get the cool people. You know, I hate to use that term, but you get people like that, whatever. And so you get those guys, and then retail shops will say, okay, look, there's a density of population that will buy this. And then the demographers come in and the really smart retailers come in. Then they can tell you within $3.14 how much each one of those people will spend at a given point in their life, okay? So storefronts follow rooftops. So you get the rooftops first, you get the population density, and then the retail will come in afterwards. And then if there's enough population density, redevelopment will naturally occur without a lot of subsidy, and you know, old buildings that, you know, don't fit the modern retail model, let's say, will be torn down and redeveloped. You know, and it's just part of this ongoing cycle. Shoot, 25 or 50 years from now, we'll sit there and say, oh, we wish we had long, skinny buildings. You know, I mean, just, you know, what we have now. It's like the old story where the guy rented out a space, and the tenant said, well, I'll take the space if you'd put carpet on the floor. And of course, this is right after the guy put tile on the floor because everybody wanted tile. You know, so it just doesn't matter what you do, you're always wrong.
Is there, when you look at Acacia Park, it's apparent. You see exactly what's going on there when you drive by. We were talking before about, you know, making it an environment that is kid friendly, family friendly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that people were talking about on our Facebook page was someplace to take my kids where I feel safe and I feel positive about it. Is there any hope in this current design for Acacia Park, or is it something that's going to have to be overhauled?
You know, I think that, you know, again, it goes back to, you know, what the expectation is. And look, if you go to San Francisco or Denver or Honolulu or Akron, or pick a place that I've been to probably recently, they all have the same kind of public space issues to deal with: homelessness, vagrancy, panhandling. It's probably more apparent in a small market like this because there's not such a wide area to disperse. And so, you know, the question becomes, do you want to live in, and again, maybe reframe the question a little bit and say, okay, are you looking for a suburban experience in an urban area? Because if you are, you're barking up the wrong tree. If you want an urban experience in an urban area, we provide that. I mean, that's what you have at Acacia Park. I think one of the things that we're doing that's really a critical first step is changing out all the lighting to LED. LED lights will emit more light. They'll actually save money, and it'll make it brighter. So, you know, what do they say? Rats don't congregate in the light. So, you know, you hope that some of that would occur. And so I think that there's a process that naturally occurs at Acacia Park. But, you know, it's again, it's how you frame the question. What experience are you really looking for? If you want a suburban experience, you want a country experience, head east and go on the other side of Mark Shuffle Boulevard, or go to Palmer Park, or go someplace else. But you know, so people's expectations probably need to change about what they're going to get when they go to the downtown.
I think that's a very good point. Yeah, because what you're going to get on Powers is not the same as what you're going to get.
Right, and it's just the same thing. You're going to get a different experience at America the Beautiful Park, or Monument Valley Park, or Acacia Park, and you have to be somewhat aware of what those different venues are. And so, I'm not going to take my, I'm not going to turn my 6-year-old kids loose in Acacia Park and go on the swing without adult supervision. Okay, I'm just not. Probably would be okay to do that up in Halbert Park over in Pleasant Valley. Difference in experience.
When you were on city council, what was the conversation like about downtown? Or was that even anything on the radar in terms of what needs to be addressed, what steps need to be taken?
Yeah, so I think unfortunately our council was probably so contentious because we were so new at the process, and we were like the game changers for just the way we do government. I'm not sure we had any, deep discussions on a variety of things that we should have had deep discussions on that could have led to better outcomes. We were mired down in the thick of the weeds, and we should have been maybe up at, in the top of the sky at anyway, and looking down. So I'm not aware of any, like specific instances that we talked about parks, except at a real macro level. And so, for example, some of the issues we talked about were, can we repurpose parks? How do we get some of the cost of operating parks? And it could be for Acacia Park, for example. How do we get some of the operating costs off the burden of the general fund, which is the typical taxpayer, and repurposing them, would be to say, okay, can you get a retail guy to put a store, let's say, for example, in a corner of Acacia Park, and his rent essentially is he pays for the maintenance of Acacia Park. Then you make the same kind of a conversational thread with respect to all the parks across the city, then say maybe you take, pick a park someplace and put an assisted living facility in there and have that assisted living facility get that free environment, but they have to pay for maintaining it so the citizens get to use it. So there's a lot of really interesting conversations that happened around parks in general, but not necessarily parks in the downtown per se, except for the odd, proposal that came through. There was a proposal at one time about, building a lid on the whole Acacia Park, so you'd have a 2-level park, which is way out there, but nothing, substantive that was real serious.
We were talking about the city auditorium. That's one of the other examples that's downtown. It's like $1.6 million.
Right.
And that would kind of change that little area in terms of bringing people down there. Who knows? Maybe a bar or restaurant opens up across the street because there's continuing.
Well, with no disrespect to my friends in the metaphysical community, when the metaphysical fair is like one of the top events in the city auditorium, they should get out their crystal ball and look to the future and maybe change that. But so somebody at the city odd picks up the phone, or from Parks picks up the phone and calls the DDA parking authority and say, hey, you know what? I heard you guys have money in your hopper. How about doing a joint venture? And I'll bet you 5 cents that if somebody actually did that, the DDA would be very receptive to helping them, repurpose the city auditorium. I'd be dumbfounded if they did. And and here's one of the problems. We travel around a lot now building our real estate company. We see all these cities that we travel to, and one of the things that we've noticed that Colorado Springs has a very stark lack of really interesting, architecturally interesting buildings, especially in the downtown. And so we have the Pioneers Museum. City Odd is a good example. That is a treasure in the community that not only needs to be saved, but needs to be enhanced for future generations. Then it would be tragic for this community if somebody didn't jump on that. And there's probably a point in time where people are talking about, let's just knock it down. What a tragedy. And when you travel, like, Salt Lake City is a great example, and realize Salt Lake City has, the Mormon church headquarters, and it's a state capital, and they have boatloads of dough. But when you just walk around their downtown, they preserved all their old buildings and the old architecture, and it's one of the things that makes a city interesting and attractive to young creative people, which is what we keep saying we want to attract to Colorado Springs. By the way, young creatives, not 50. I'm talking about maybe 25 to 35, maybe 40 at the outset. And so we want to attract those kind of people. And of course, the financial metric is you attract those people and jobs will come. They'll build the aggregate economy, which then you'll have more money to put into parks and places for families and children. So everything's tied together in a nice package at some point.
And I know you can go in depth about this, but the process, if I wanted to start a business, if I was somebody who said, here's a great idea, I need a storefront, and I want to go to downtown Colorado Springs, what's the process if I were to come through and talk to you? What would I need to know?
Well, I think that there's certain process you have to go through with the city. Actually, starting a business in Colorado Springs is a very, very, very easy proposition. A great credit to Mayor Bach, as he really has lived up to one of his great themes is to make Colorado Springs one of the most business-friendly cities in America. And I think by and large it is. There's two areas that need to be really fine-tuned. One is with regard to fire department and inspections and some of the requirements that they put on, and but I think that by and large we're a very friendly city, and so I think that the process is easy. Somebody goes downtown, they walk around, they find a building they like, and they negotiate a deal with the building owner, and pretty much turnkey, and they walk in and they open up and they're selling stuff. Trick that most people fail to engage in is whether or not there's enough market dynamic to support what it is they want to do, especially in that class of tenant, and that's where there's a real problem. The kind of tenant that you get in our downtown is what we call a BC credit tenant. It's not like, we're not getting a lot of national retailers downtown. And the reason we're not is because there's not enough population and money density. So you have to have those things. And until you get those, you're not going to really get a big jump downtown.
One of the things, I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, and the problem, no one wanted to develop on their main street. It was a street called Gay Street. And Gap, Banana Republic, whoever would walk in and say, hey, we'd love to open a storefront. We hear great things about your city. How long is it going to take to get this building ready?
Right.
And 16 to 18 months.
Right.
Sorry, talk to us when it's 4 to 6 months. Are we at a good place overall, do you think, where you're talking about Mayor Bach
that is like spot on question. And I've had this, actually I had a conversation with Mayor Bach a month or so ago. We came back from Salt Lake, and I keep using Salt Lake as poster child. I don't want to, but I've just been there a lot. And you go to Salt Lake, and they have one of the most robust distribution economies in America at this point. And so you can drive around their industrial park landscape, and they have buildings that are teed up and ready for tenants, like right now. You move to our town, and you move right in. And one of the problems we have in Colorado Springs is we don't have that kind of real estate inventory readily available for people who want to come here, because we don't build on spec in this town anymore. We just build when we have a need, and so the time process, it's a delayed time process, and it is problematic. You could make an argument that we have properties available on Academy Boulevard, but again, the problem you got on Academy Boulevard, Palmer Park, Platt, Hancock. Pick a major intersection where there is a high volume of vacant buildings on those corners. But same deal, there's not enough money density out there. There are people out there, but not the right kind of people to support the kind of traffic or trade you're talking about. And it's the same problem you would have downtown. So if somebody says, I'd like to come in and put a Trader Joe's in downtown. Okay, well, they better be thinking strategically, because it's going to be from start to finish. You're probably a 2-year window by the time you get Trader Joe's to come in here and sign the contract and they're open for business. And so, and again, the problem is that when you compete in a global marketplace, there are other places for Trader Joe's to go. They don't come here because they think we have cool bike trails. They come here because we have population and money density, and they want to sell their stuff to those folks. And every day of delay for them to get into that market costs them money to their bottom line. And so, you could make a pretty interesting argument. I've tried to say, build something and people will come. But again, problem is that we look at things, in my opinion, in Colorado Springs from a perspective of scarcity, and we need to look at things from a perspective of abundance. And so what we do from a perspective of scarcity, you really look at everything as an expense. How do you cover the cost? It's an expense. Wrong. That's wrong. What you should be doing is saying, hey, let's look at everything as an investment. How do we invest in our city? How do we invest in our future? How do we invest in ourselves? Go build some of this really interesting real estate that people need. If you do that, probably those national retailers start coming in. Go back to the project I mentioned to reimagine West Bijou Street from I-25 to the bottom of the Pinery Hill. What a phenomenal opportunity to do it. Go over there and redo that whole 3 or 4 block corridor and turn that into a brand new old town. Throw some cobblestone, get some parking. It's on the interstate. At the top of the Pinery is going to be, the Pinery Hill is the Pinery. It's a $12 million event center. They're paying cash for it. So the neighborhood's an improved neighborhood. That one project, if somebody could figure out how to, get the investment together with the city and do that project, that would change the city. That would change the city. And so you need to look at projects like that. I'm aware of some projects on the Nevada Avenue corridor near the downtown that will, help change. And the problem is that we have individual projects going on which don't seem to have a lot of connectivity and a lot of cohesion. And so we say as realtors, developers, city leaders, say, hey, that's a great project, go ahead and go do that. And really we ought to be, there's a lot of things you could do together that would make things easier. But.
Well, yeah, like the public market coming up, they searched and found a place, and someone says, you know what, I can attach, how hard is it to actually get all these people in the same room, so to speak, and say, let's do this all together, maybe that makes it easy. Is that
well, yeah. Well, it has to be. At some point, it's going to be. Okay, so at some point, what happens in any community that's successful is they figure that out. And there's really interesting studies about cities that grow, and there is a theory that says if you get the average temperature in January, you can correlate that to a city that's on the growth. And I think it's debunked pretty easily, but that is a theory in economics that I've heard people talk about. The number one key issue to growing a city is really the ease with which it is to develop through the government's rules and restrictions, and that's like almost, it's such a truism, it should be a cliche, but all the economists, not just the real estate people, but the economists, people who study the economy say the same thing. It's not about bike trails. It's not about young creative people. It's not about, markets, outdoor markets. It's about how easy is it for my business to locate from point X to your community, and how cooperative is the local government. How intrusive are, state and local mandated benefits that I have to give to employees? How laissez-faire is that marketplace? And so how you really jumpstart an economy in Colorado Springs and the downtown is to make sure we're not, we don't have an oppressive or intrusive governmental process. We don't have mandates that dictate they have to provide certain benefits. We make it just kind of, I don't want to say use the term Wild West, but you need to make it very easy for people to locate from a California to a Colorado Springs and set them up in business. Low taxes are important, and that's why people in this community have been so low tax, but at some point, in my opinion, you go from kind of the ridiculous to the sublime. And you have to pay some taxes, you have to pay some money if you want to have some stuff, you can't, nothing's free. And there are actually people, I've actually dealt with people in California who have offices in Colorado Springs, and they say, California is too much, and here it's too low. As much as we can't believe they collect that much in California, we can't believe you collect that little here. And because you collect that little here, we're concerned you're not going to have enough money to provide the infrastructure we need when we need it. And so there is a happy medium, and I don't think we've struck that happy medium yet.
But that's political suicide, though. But somebody...
No, it isn't. It's leadership. It's called leadership,
okay.
And that's probably why I got kicked out of office, because I actually tried to lead. And I said a lot of things and still do say things that are very controversial, but because I have a conviction and I have belief, and I think that, at the end of the day, there are things that need to be said. And I think that the public is mature enough to hear them, and they don't want to have all this backroom finessing going on, which is essentially how government, unfortunately, works everywhere, at the federal level, state and local level, and so that was the beginning of the end for little Timmy Leigh from Grand Forks, North Dakota. But you have to have leadership, and that's the hard part. And leadership does demand that you have a plan. You have to have a vision. You have to have a plan, and then you have to be able to bring all the different coalitions together, which really was Hickenlooper's big claim to fame in the Denver market. And when John was the mayor, and I spoke to him actually several times about this when I was running for office, and when he was mayor, he told me on more than one occasion, the trick is get a project, get everybody on the bus, get everybody to vote for it, so you have the money and the funding, but you have to have the vision, you have to have the project, and you have to have buy-in. And that's we don't do that here. We don't have that visionary project that's readily shared amongst the people. We have, a variety of tries at projects, but we don't have that that one big project. It might be the Riverwalk. It might be, my idea, which is to rebrand Colorado Springs as America's Olympic City and change Academy Boulevard into Olympic Boulevard. Okay, but we have a variety of smaller projects. We don't have that one real supervening project, and that's vision, and that would require investment. And that might be political suicide, but in my opinion, that's leadership, and that's why Hickenlooper is the governor. People think that he's a leader. A lot of stuff he did would have been considered political suicide. So I guess maybe my call to action is who's going to step to the plate and lead that charge? The problem we have with local government right now is we're so busy, fighting the daily battles that we have not had, and this is no discredit to Mayor Box. I think he's a wonderful leader, but he is so busy fighting a lot of the battles day by day that if he has a strategic vision, and I'm sure that he probably does have one, but I don't think he's out in the public space readily articulating it and getting buy-in from all the citizens. You know, he's probably got, you know, visionary, you know, kinds of ideas for projects, but there's nobody out in front really saying, this is the direction we're going, this is the 80,000 foot project, and so on. So that's what we need to do, and that's how, you know, by inference, you can develop, you know, Academy Boulevard, and you develop everything west to the mountains, and, you know, the downtown gets redeveloped, and everybody lives happily ever after.
Anything else you want to say?
PMP to that. I think I'm good.